Hey guys, this is the final refactor of my videos to show you how to fetch data from an API and use that in a query loop in a Bricks Builder. The initial version I didn't take into account if you've got indexed arrays as values that are returned. For example, where we've got ingredients and instructions, they're actually indexed arrays. So we needed a way to output those. So the second video I did dealt with that. So you can tell it it's an indexed array and it'll create an HTML UL for you. Or you can specify a formatter which will format that data however you want it and return the HTML for that. So one thing that was missing in there, I felt, was the ability to add additional attributes to the HTML. The example here is, for example, if we look at this first output here, which is our ingredients, we can now have an ARIA label and a data purpose. And the way I've refactored this code is that you can put whatever attributes you want. So you can specify anything you can dream up that you need. You can specify those in the dynamic tag for bricks. So that is what we're going to cover today. The example there, if we go down to the ingredients, in the ingredients, we've just got an ARIA label which says ingredients list. Okay, so how this is achieved is in the builder. If we have a look at the ingredients, what I have now, and I'll zoom in because it might be a bit hard for you to see. So what I've got now is I've added an attribute here, which is ARIA underscore label, and in single quotes I'll put my ARIA label there. I've added another attribute which is at data underscore purpose, and in single quotes I've put my test. Now those are rendering, let's go back to our instructions. Those are rendering an ARIA label and a data purpose. So I'm going to show you very quickly how this happens, and then we'll leave it at that. Actually, I might show you then how to just style these, because that's another question that came up for me, for some users. Okay, so what I've done is I've changed the way the attributes are being passed. So the function to render your deep array from loop tag, that part of it is pretty much the same, except for down here, instead of sending the individual attributes that we got from, for example, we got here key path, ARIA label, formatter, fallback, data purpose. Instead of sending those individually to the sub-functions that actually do the processing, we just send the entire attribute array. So whatever you put in this here, as long as you have an at symbol in front of it, test attribute is another test. So you can add whatever attribute you want, just prefix with the at, use the underscores and a colon, and then if your value has spaces in it, put it in single quotes. That's all you have to do there to pass that attribute through to your code. And then in your code, let's have a look at this. So we go down to the WP dot notation from current loop object, which is that one there. All that's doing is getting the current array element from our API data and passing that and the attributes through to the next function. Okay, so I'm going to return whatever result we get from that. So in this function here, I've added the attributes as a property. And I've just set it to default to a empty array, just in case you call this with no attributes, we can deal with that in our code. Okay, let's tidy some of this formatting up here. All right, so instead of passing these values through individually up there, we just get the whole array, and then we can decide which of those we want to use. Okay, so that's that there. And then in the formatter, if the formatter is specified, so if we have our at formatter, then we're going to call the user function of that formatter, and we're going to, this part was exactly the same previously, but we've added a property that it's going to pass through, which is the attributes. And the same for just a standard indexed array. If we have at is indexed, we're going to do the same thing, call the this function here, we're going to pass the attributes into it. So let's see how that actually works. So let's say, for example, it's a basic indexed array that we want and we haven't specified a formatter. What it's going to do is we've added the attributes as our second property, so that's a change, and just move these properties along one. And what we're doing there is getting our properties from there, and I've added this line here. All right, the rest of it's the same. I've added this line. I've created a aria underscore label. If the attribute of aria underscore label is not empty, then we want to have a string for aria label with that attribute's aria label. Otherwise, it's an empty string. And then in our UL, we're just outputting the whatever the result of that is. So if there's no aria label, we don't get anything. If there is an aria label, it outputs that entire string there. And that's all we had to do to deal with that additional property. Okay, so now I'm going to look at the next example here, which I think I put on. This one I did. I specified my formatter as my WPE test formatter. And in here, so that's going to call this function instead of that one. All right, so it gets to up here. We've specified a formatter, so we're going to call the formatter and return the result from that. We're never going to run this function, next function, so the formatter takes precedence. So we're going to call this function instead with our attributes, give it a name, aria label from the attribute, data purpose. I've just created that as an example. We can be whatever we want. We're going to look for the purpose attribute. If it exists, we're going to set data purpose to the attribute or an empty string, and then just output that on the OL. So if we look at the OL for that, we will see we have, that's not it, it's the one up here we're doing up here. We can see that we've got our aria label as test label and our data purpose as my test. So you can see you can pass in whatever you want to this function that's dealing with that array to output your HTML. So I think it's cool. I think it means it's a lot more flexible, and all you need to do is create formatter functions and call those and pass in whatever attributes you want, and that's going to be usable in your code, and you can apply that. All right, so that's that. Now the next thing is if we look at the so we'll look at this first one here. We'll see that our class is this WPE API indexed array UL. So in my code here, we're also test formatter. Let's have a look on there, just see if that's updated. Just going to refresh the screen here. I'm going to muddle it up between the two. Now, there we go. It's this one here. So we've got a test formatter where we can actually access that and as a class path, or we can use the default. If we want to do all of the indexed array ULs, we can use that. Where's it getting that from? Oh, sorry, I forgot. I played with this previously, so I'm going to get rid of that. I put a class on when I was playing, which has got me confused a little bit there. So, okay, let's go back to what do we got? All right, so what we've got here is our WPS test formatter, and we've got our allies as elements of that. So if I grab that name there and come back to my instructions, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a class. Okay, and on that class, we can see these over here that will have that class because this is a loop. Let's go to our CSS and do root, padding, none, and we're going to do margin, none, and list, style, type of none. Okay, and then we're going to do root. Actually, let's set the display on that as well to flex. Flex and flex direction 2 column. Okay, I'm just going to see if that actually applied. Just go to the front end. We did not get that happening. Why didn't we have it happening? WTS format a test. Because we're not on the okay, so we need to target the OL. No, we don't. We can put it there. We should have in our styles. Not none. Sorry, so I'm used to these. So it's 0, 0. Format a test. Padding 0, padding 0. Why are they being overridden? Why are they being over? It's actually output. It hasn't put the output on the class. Why is it not on the class? Let's have a look. That's interesting. Whoa. Meta test. It's a bricks thing. Okay, so I just cut it, put it back in. So I just had a little bricks bug going on there. So that actually worked. All right, so we've now changed that. Now we've actually just taken all the padding and the margin off. So let's stick do a root li. And what we're going to do there is, let's put actually let's put some spacing on that. So I'm going to put the row gap of, I don't know, 1 rem. I won't use values from frameworks here. I'll just use raw values, but I would suggest you use framework values here. And on the li, we're going to do a padding. Padding block end, and let's do 0.5 rem. Actually, no, let's set the font size on here to 1.2 rem. So in bricks, that will be 12 pixels because we're our base font size is 10 pixels. And then on the li, we're going to do a padding block end of, let's do 1 em. Okay, and let's do a border bottom of 1 px solid. Let's just do a hex value here of 0000 00, and then maybe 30. That's got a little bit of opacity. That's too much padding, so let's make that 0.5. Okay, let's have a look now. So there's our ingredients there, and we've output the yep, there's our styling there for it. And there for the li, there's our styling there for it. So we can do this in bricks. So the cool thing is here, in the content, all we have to do is specify our formatter. If we want to format it differently, we specify whatever attributes we want. And then in the code box, we just use that formatter that we've provided. If we put a class name here, we can use that class name, on this case, the OL. And on the allies, we've used the class name _ ally, and then we can just style that up directly from using bricks here. So I think that's pretty flexible. I can't think of a scenario now that we can't use this for. There's bound to be one that'll come up, but for now I think I'm done, and I will leave this series at that. Okay.